Hello guys, welcome to today's video. Today's video we're talking about the difference between an interpreted language and a compiled language. We also talk about what an interpreter is, what a compiler is. Let's talk about interpreter. Interpreter is a translator that is being used by an interpreted language, while a compiler is a translator that is being used by a compiled language.
Interpreted language
are those languages that make use of an interpreter for them to turn their codes to a binary codes, because we all know that machines tend to understand zeros and ones, which are the binary codes. So with help of interpreter, we're able to convert it to a binary code, and also that of a compiler to binary code. So examples of programming language that exists an interpreter. Example, we know that Python is the most popular one known that uses an interpreter. Also have JavaScript, also make use of an interpreter. Rust, I think there are a few other of them, so which you can just hit on the line to check. So why don't we use one? Why do we tend to create another one when we have one already? Why do, if compiler was better, why don't we use better? If interpreter was better, why do we tend to use both of them? Reason is this: when it comes to that of interpreter tend to be a little bit slower. Reason is this: interpreter executes your code step by step. What does it mean? Let's imagine, for example, you want to read your book from page 1 to page 10. I don't think you jump to page 10, so you read page 1, page 2, page 3. So everything follows step by step, follows a particular sequence. So that's what an interpreter does. And since it's following step by step, it can make it a little bit slower. For example, where your script, for example, is maybe, for example, is 20 lines of code. For example, the interpreter will take line 1 initially, then interpreter convert it to a machine language, takes line 2, convert it to machine language, takes line 3, convert it to machine language. You can see in this process it can be a little bit slow. So, but regardless of how slow an interpreter is, it has zone at the advantage side. When it comes to it's easy to, when it comes to understanding, interpreter tends to be easier. Interpreted language in general tends to be a little bit easier, unlike that of a compiler or a compiled language. And I made mention of interpreted language like that of Python. We all know that Python is the easiest language to learn out there, and don't be fooled that it's easy. It's one of the most powerful language out there. So let me talk a little bit more on that of a compiler. A compiler just take your bunch of codes, everything, and then convert it to a machine language. You can see the difference. Interpreter takes one, then go, second one, then go, and the third one does that till reach the last, which is your last piece of code. But why a compiler just take everything once, boom, then convert it to a machine code, easy, faster. So the compiler, like I said, the compiler just compiles the entire code and then is run. And there are examples of languages that uses a compiler, the C, or the C, or the C++, or the I think goes to use a compiler, and there are a lot of other languages that uses a compiler. One advantage of compiler is the speed and the fastness. It's fast and efficient, and that's why a compiler language is mainly used for operating systems and for games because of how fast they are. While when it comes to interpreter are mainly used for data analysis, machine learning, solving programs, and then it can also be for web development, and there are a lot of some other things that interpreted language tend to have more advantage over the compiled language. But when it comes to that of speed, compiled language tend to be ahead of interpreted language. But don't think interpreted language is not fast. It's fast, but when it comes to that of competition compared to it for compiled language, tend to be a little bit slower. So I think this basically covers what a compiler is and what an interpreter is. Here is a recap of what we talked in this video. The compiler compiles the entire script at once and then run it once. An interpreter interprets your script step by step, one after the other. It, like, for example, let's say when you want to relate it to a compiler, it takes your first line of code, compiles it, and convert it to a machine language. Take your second line, compiles it, turn it to a machine language. Take your third line, compiles it, and so on and so forth. But a compiler just compiles everything from line 0 to line 100 to line where your script stop. Just compiles everything to a machine language at once. When it comes to advantage, interpreter tend to have more advantage over a compiler. The reason is, number one, it's easier to debug. The reason is because since the script runs step by step, when you get to a particular step that the way the error is, it will just stop. It will display to you that, okay, oh, this error caused a line, maybe a particular line. Let's say you have a code a script that consists of 20 lines, for example, and you had an error at line 15, for example. When you get to line 15, it will tell you you have an error at line 15. But when compared to that of a compiler, since everything converges at once and then run, it's harder to debug. Another advantage of interpreted language is across platform. It works in many operating systems as far as there's an interpreter that is on it. That's one advantage of a interpreted language. Another advantage is beginners friendly. Compared to compiled languages, it's easier to understand. Let's use Python for example. One of the Python is the easiest programming language out there to learn. And then let's talk about advantages of compile over an interpreter. When your main aim is that of speed, when you are more concerned on speed, I think a compiled language, since it compiles everything once and then boom. So when you can't compare the speed with to an interpreted language. So that's one of the things. And another thing is compiled language are mainly used for operating system, unlike interpreter, which are hardly used. So the examples of compiled language include that of C++ or C, and a lot of other ones which you can just go ahead and learn and then check it for yourself.